All right, let's talk about Brock Wagner. He's got a long history with beer, actually before he was even born. His great-great-great-grandfather came from Alsace, France, the mid-1800s, and opened Wagner's Beer Hall in San Francisco. So it's now been renamed the Saloon, oldest existing bar in San Francisco. I don't know if anybody's been there, heard of it, but anyways. Brock grew up in Cincinnati and Brussels, both big brewing towns. Ended up at Rice University and was introduced to home brewing. So started his own home brewing at Rice, and graduated from Rice. Went to investment banking. Spent 6 years in investment banking, and had some crazy idea to start his own craft brewery. And we have St. Arnold's today, and today it's the oldest craft brewery in Texas. And I don't know if anybody knows about some of the archaic laws that Texas has in terms of beers and craft breweries, and I'm sure Brock will touch on it, but that's definitely a testament to stick around this long. So you can get St. Arnold's in Texas, Florida, Louisiana. 2010, I don't know if you guys have been to the new brewery and been there and taken the tour. I, for one, have taken the tour. I've never actually been on the tour, but I took the tour and kind of sat around and drank beer. Hopefully that's all right, Brock. But anyways, with that, let's welcome up Brock Wagner.
Thanks a lot. Thank you. Well, two quick things. First, I'd like to thank everybody for not hissing every time Rice was mentioned. And second, on the top 100 top 100 list was a craft brewery. No label was on there, so very nice couple out in Katy. So so I'm going to talk about a couple things that kind of go in parallel today. One is the story of our brewery and how basically how stupid I was to open a craft brewery in Houston in 1994, which, by the way, I opened St. Arnold's in 1994, which turned out to be a brilliant idea in 2006. So, and then the other part is going to be kind of the parallel of how you manage a business during very difficult times, and then how you manage a business when it's growing rapidly, which is two very different things, and how really the growth of social media kind of came along at a perfect time for us, and how that became a big part of who we are. So I started off, as was mentioned, as a home brewer in college. So technically I am using what I learned at Rice today. This was not what my parents had in mind for me. But I had an interesting job, but I hated it. And I started to think about what do I really want to do? And I realized I wanted to do something I was passionate about. So what was I passionate about? Well, brewing and beer. In fact, I knew that there was an issue because I brewed way more beer than I could drink. But I looked around the country. Houston was the largest city at that time that didn't have a craft brewery in it. So I was like, this is perfect. I loved Houston. I think it's a great town and continue to be a huge promoter of the city. But when I opened St. Arnold's, it turned out there were about 37 craft beer drinkers here. I knew them all. So then became the challenge of how do we go about telling people about this product? And the things that really helped us during those very, very lean years, I mean, we grew for our first 3 years, and then we were flat for close to 5 years. And the things that kind of kept us going was a very loyal customer base. And the customers that we gained then, we still have today. And that's still how we operate. We want, when we gain a customer, we want that to be a customer forever. But one of the first things we started to do is when people came in and visited our brewery, we had them sign up for our email list. And I know this, you're probably going, so that's obvious. It wasn't back then. In 1994, that was right about the time that people first started to get personal email addresses. Up till then, people had email for business. If you worked in the government or at a big company, you used it to talk to your coworkers. But that was when people started getting CompuServe addresses. I love CompuServe addresses because they were 13866577924 at CompuServe.com. They were very personal. But the difference that this made is when we did our opening party, we did it the old-fashioned way. We gathered everybody we knew's address, entered it into a database, printed out labels. We had to go get somebody to design a postcard, print the postcard, get the postcards back, print all the address labels, put the address labels on the postcard, put the stamps on the postcards, mail them out. And then, of course, a bunch of them come back because we couldn't read your writing. But it was very expensive. It took time. You really had to plan ahead. With this email list, I remember when we had like 200 people on the list. And we're like, this is awesome. But we would send out, let's say we decided we wanted to do an event. It's Monday, we want to do an event on Thursday at the Ginger Man. Now all we had to do is I had to sit down at my computer, type up a little announcement, hit send. Actually, I had to cut it into tranches of 50 people because that was all the software could handle back then, and send it out. And the only thing that cost was my time. And my time was free because I wasn't paying myself anything. And so this really created this ability for us to reach our customer. And that created a real connection with our customer. The other interesting thing was back then I would send out this newsletter to 200 people, and I'd get about 100 conversational responses. So newsletters, email was seen as a conversational tool back then. Today we send the newsletter out to 50,000 people, and we get 0 conversational responses. Today it is just a one-way conversation. Twitter and Facebook, that's where the conversations occur. The other thing that we did that I think really helped us get going and create that bond with people was have tours. We started doing tours at St. Arnold's the very first Saturday we were open. And we did them every Saturday ever since, although we've now expanded to 6 days a week actually on our tours. But the tours were important because that gave us the ability for people to come in, see who we were. We could really explain what the business was and convey our mission and our culture. And people could see it wasn't just like some sort of marketing deal. They could see the passion that we had for it. And now all those people who came and visited, they were on our email list, and they also started to view the brewery as their brewery. And they went out, and they were the proselytizers for us who helped spread the word. When I started St. Arnold's, I had 2 goals. I wrote a mission statement, which turns out is actually a critical exercise, not just something that your professor tells you about, and what the hell. But that was another very important piece for us, especially in those very lean years, because if you start a business and you're struggling, one of the natural things to do is say, I need to change my business and start chasing things. And sometimes that may not be a bad idea if you're really off base. But we felt like we had a great thing going and believed in what we were doing. And so that mission, having that mission statement was really important because that kept us, gave us sort of the center board to keep working on. And there was 2 things. One was brew and sell the best beer in Texas. And the other was to create an institution that Houston and the region was proud of. And I'm passionate about beer. I love developing the beers. I'm proud of all the medals that we've won over the years at the Great American Beer Festival, World Beer Cup. But I'm equally passionate about building community, which is, to me, is what beer is ultimately all about. You know, if you go back to the history of civilization, beer is what started it all. You don't think people settled to bake a loaf of bread, do you? This is actually the leading archaeological theory. The story goes that there were a couple hunters and gatherers, gathered wild barley seed, mushed it together, made something crude, barley soup. Maybe they were after something bread-like. Whatever, it didn't work out really well. They went out, they hunted and gathered for a couple weeks. It rained while they were gone. They came back to their campsite one night, tired and hungry and thirsty, and they look at this bowl of weird barley juice that kind of had a foamy crust on it. And, it's a couple dudes, remember? You thirsty? Yeah. All right, let's drink it. So they did. And at the end of it, they looked at each other and said, hey, I feel pretty good right now. The other one said, you're cute. And with that, beer was born, and that is believed to be the impetus for why people settled down and formed agrarian communities. But even today, I mean, I think if you look at beer, it is a beverage. It's a great beverage because it brings people together. If you come out on our tours and you see who's on our tours, you will see friends, you'll see family, you'll see kids. People will meet new people. I think the nice thing about beer is it's a beverage you can sit around and drink, you know, for an evening. I'm not encouraging anybody to over imbibe here, but I don't know about you, but if you've ever tried to sit around for an evening and drink martinis, I'm guessing it didn't turn out very well for you. Whereas beer, this encourages much more, you know, being social. And, you know, I love that about it, and we really get involved in the community, and that's kind of a pillar of our whole operation and what we do. But having those two, that mission was very important. And we struggled, and we had days where I'd go into work and I'd go, you know, we're making, I think this is really good beer, and why aren't our numbers there? But it took a kind of there was a couple things working against us. One was just a culture of Texas was very much, it was cool to be walking around with a long neck of Bud Light. And that was ingrained in people. It was sort of that, I want to be a rancher, I want to be a roughneck. Whereas the frat boy in Colorado would try to impress the girl with, I can cook. I know about wine and good beer. That just wasn't the culture down here. But we really started to see things change in the early 2000s. If you ever came out on the tour at the old place, you would have seen me at the front door carding everybody who came in. And if you looked like you were under 30, I would card you. Or if you were a lady who was about 45, I'd also card you. Because that also made for that was a great way to get loyal customers too. But I would see very few people coming in on our tours in the early days who were under 30. Our customer was sort of age 35 and up. And early 2000s, I started to notice some people in their late 20s, mid-20s kind of showing up on the tour. By the mid-2000s, I started seeing people showing up on their 21st birthday. And that was really when we saw the big change in our sales. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that we were around for, at that point, 10 years. Craft beer had existed nationally for about 20 years at that point. And people who were turning 21, their view of what beer was this huge spectrum of flavor and diversity of styles. Whereas, like when I turned 21, if somebody asked you, what kind of beer do you drink? That was just code for, do you drink Bud, Miller, or Coors? And then a near religious discussion would ensue. I'm a Bud man. My dad is a Bud man. Grandpa's a Bud man. We don't talk to Miller folk. And today, if you ask a 21-year-old what kind of beer do you drink, they'll probably say, "Oh, I love IPAs. I love Hefeweizens. I love a wit. I love Kolsch." They'll tell you a beer style more likely than that one brand that they now like staple to themselves, and that's who they are. And that's been a great thing for us, obviously. I think for the entire craft beer industry. When I started looking at opening St. Arnold's, there was 100 shipping craft breweries around the country. I went and visited about 25 of them. Today, I think the number is up to about 3,000. Houston, you go back 6 years, there was one craft brewery in the Houston area. Today, there's, I think, 25 in the greater Houston area. So it just shows you how it's growing. So our first kind of 8 years, close to 10 years, was this really kind of struggle to keep going, and it was very much about watching the pennies and staying focused on the little parts of the business, making sure we're true to ourselves, but also making sure that we can make payroll every week. Once the craft brewing really took off and our sales took off, I mean, we averaged from 2003 on, we've averaged 23% growth every year compounded. That's a whole different issue for how you run your company. Suddenly, I mean, in the early years, I did the budget because John demanded that we do a budget every year. He was our banker back then. Thank you, John. And we would do the budget and track it throughout the year. Once we started growing rapidly, every November, December, we'd put together the budget for the next year, and then the following November, December, we'd do the budget for the following year. But we'd realized we had not looked at that budget once in the previous 12 months, so we stopped budgeting. Because when you're a rapidly growing company, it becomes a whole different set of issues. And having a budget is an academic exercise that's almost worthless, because you're going to be so far off of it that you don't know what it's going to be, so why do it? Suddenly it becomes, how do I make sure that I have the capacity to meet the demand? That becomes the kind of critical budgeting exercise. And for that, you do kind of a back of the envelope. Okay, here's our growth. How many tanks do we have? Can our bottling line keep up? Can our brew house keep up? And then, do we have enough cash flow to buy these tanks and things? And really, that's all you needed to know. The other big issue we suddenly had was hiring people and how to go about doing that well as you're trying to add lots of people. And I'm very particular about getting really good people and people who understand who we are. How do you go about doing that and maintaining your culture? And when we had 11 people, I had 10 direct reports. So obviously we have a horizontal organization. Today we have 75 people. And like when we hire people, depending what position we're hiring for, 2 promotions or sometimes 3 promotions, and you have my job. So we still have a very horizontal operation. And one of the things I struggled with is, in the early days, every single person is tasked with doing lots of things, and there's very little structure. And it's kind of an entrepreneurial spirit. It's a very difficult word for brewers to say, by the way. Another funny thing is drink a bunch and then try to say the word brewery. Brewery. But as companies grow, typically what happens, the risk of failure becomes higher if somebody's not doing their job well. And the organization becomes more complex, so you start putting a lot of structure in. And the structure restricts what people can do. Now, this is your job description, this is your job description, don't go beyond that. That did not appeal to me particularly. A friend of mine, actually was my daughter's soccer coach, we were talking about things one day, and he sent me Netflix corporate philosophy. And it was really interesting. I mean, some of it didn't apply because they were high tech, and some of their stuff was about how you pay people, and that assumed that you had money. Which the funny thing about high tech, they didn't generate it, but people just kept giving it to them. The great thing of pride was the bigger your burn rate, the more successful you were. But there was one element in there that really rang true to me, which was rather than create more structure, hire better people who can handle the complexity and put as little structure in as you possibly can. And that's what we've done. And so every time we hire people, we're trying to always hire better and better people. And when you tell your coworkers this, you get one of two reactions. Some people go, "Oh, that's exciting. You're bringing in great assets for me to utilize and really grow the business." Some people, all they hear is, "You're hiring somebody better than me. This is career limiting for me." And interestingly, that mindset immediately becomes career limiting for those people. Fortunately, most of our people really were in the first group, and we've had very little turnover in our company over the years. But I would say that today, the greatest strength of St. Arnold is our 75 people. We have an amazing group of people. We hire people who are passionate about what we do. Obviously, that you got to be competent, but we want people who want to come work at St. Arnold. It's not a job. It's kind of a calling. And one of the other tests is I have to want to have a beer with you, because nothing sucks more than having a beer with somebody that you don't want to have a beer with. And I'm probably going to have a beer with anybody we hire. Today, we've continued to grow. We outgrew our original space. For those of you who visited our beautiful old distribution warehouse we used to be in, moved to the new building now almost 5 years ago. We've continued to expand. We bought the tow lot that was across the street. If anybody's car got towed from downtown or Montrose over there, we have nothing to do with that. And no, they're not going away. We just ended up moving them a little further down the street. Because our new building, which I thought was going to take 15 to 20 years to fill up, after 5 years, we've filled it up. So thank you all. We continue to be very involved in the community. That's still a pillar of everything that we do. From supporting different nonprofits to, for years we've had a beer named Alyssa, which supports the tall ship in Galveston, keeps it sailing. We recently renamed Brown Ale to Ale Wagner and are donating $1 a case from that beer to Bark and doing animal rescue and spay and neuter education, mainly because I can't adopt any more rescue animals in my house. And we continue to grow. Our beer is available all over Texas. We added Louisiana about close to 5 years ago now, which that's gone very well. Everybody's Catholic there. And recently we expanded to Florida. We're on the Gulf Coast right now. We're going to go into the South Florida area. But I don't have any great desire to go national, to take over the world. That's kind of not my personality. I probably wouldn't even be very good at it if that's what we suddenly decided that our strategy was going to be. 2/3 of our sales are in the greater Houston area, and that's the way I like it, and it continues to grow here. About 2 years ago, I had a meeting with my coworkers. I said, I have achieved everything that I wanted when I opened St. Arnold's. I'm a happy guy. It turns out they have not all achieved everything that they want to. So I said, all right, I'm along for the ride. I love doing this. This is what I want to do. But it's up to y'all to keep keep driving it forward, and I will certainly do everything I can to assist. So that's really kind of what my goal is over the next 20 years, is to see that come to fruition for everybody who works at St. Arnold's. It was alluded to about the wonderful laws of Texas and brewing. When people ask me, what would I have done different? My answer is, I would not have opened St. Arnold's in Texas. Our laws then and still are definitely in the bottom half of the brewery-friendly laws in this country. And I've campaigned for, it took about 10 years before we finally had a success last session and made it legal for us to sell you beer, but you have to drink it on premise. Up to that point, when you came to the brewery, in the early years, the tour was free, and we just gave you the beer. Then in 2006, when our tours really started to grow, we started charging you to come on the tour. Back then, it was $5. It's up to $10 now. But I convinced the TABC back then that we were charging for the tour and the souvenir glass, but the beer was free. They bought it. But recently we got it changed to that we can sell you beer. Now, I would have given my eye teeth to have had that law when we opened. Today we've kind of created a business model around the old laws, and it's a little bit of lagniappe to be able to sell you a special. If you come, some of our special releases, we'll have those for sale that you can enjoy on the tour. But it would have made a huge difference for us day one. We're going to continue to try to change the laws to make them friendlier for breweries, especially breweries starting up. One of the big things we're going to try to get is to be able to sell you a 6-pack to take home. Because if you come to the brewery and have a great time and you buy that 6-pack and you take it home, that's going to be a story that you tell to people. When they come over and you bring them a beer and say, hey, yeah, I got this at St. Arnold's, and you'll tell about the whole experience. The next time you want a St. Arnold's and you're going to H-E-B or Kroger or Randall's, you're probably not going to go, oh, I'm going to drive downtown to the St. Arnold's to pick up my 6-pack of St. Arnold's. So it really is an additional, it builds the economy of beer. So those will be some of the things we'll be working on going forward. That and trying to buy the street that's in between us and our existing building so we can keep expanding where we are. I want to thank everybody today. I guess I'll open it up for questions. I guess I should, one question I usually get that I always forgot to get to tell everybody is who St. Arnold is. St. Arnold's a real person. He was a bishop of Metz from 612 to 629. He was known for running around the countryside telling his parishioners, do not drink water. Water's bad, which was true back then. He said, drink beer. 'Tis a gift of God. It is good. He was a very popular bishop. Because of this, he became the patron saint of brewers, and we named our brewery after him. So, anyway, any questions?
Two-part question, or question and a comment. One, do you believe customers are always right?
No.
I was hoping you'd say yes. My next response would be whatever we have to do to get Christmas ale available for a longer period of time, like the whole year, would be great.
I mean, you always listen to customers. You always respond to customers. But I have a perfect example. That occurred yesterday. A lady decided that we were racist. She had been at a tasting, and one of our guys was sampling at a store, and people were kind of in line, and then somebody else came up over here, and he was serving these people, and then he served the lady here, who'd come in after the lady behind had been in line. She was about to get served, but she decided that he did this because our guy was racist and didn't like her race, and just went off on our guy. And then she emailed us about it too. a situation like that, you respond, you say, we are not racist. We'll talk to our guy about, making sure that he's sensitive to these issues. But, and then my other response was, I was talking to a director of sales who was emailing with a lady. Says, and if you get another response, you don't respond to that because there's a certain level of crazy that you can't communicate with. So, I mean, but I will say we will respond to every single issue that somebody brings to us, and because I think that is what's important, to make our customer is not always right, but our customer is always heard. How does that sound?
What kind of a corporate structure do you have? How many owners do you have?
So we are a C Corp. We had, our history is we had about 19 people when we started. My partner and myself put in the majority of the money, and then we had 17 outside shareholders. Then after 5 years, when the company was still flat, I bought everybody out except my dad. And actually my old partner, he still has a little bit. And then when we went to build the new place, I realized I probably needed some equity to help with the money, the building of the new place. And thank goodness I did, because we had horrible cost overruns, as anybody who's ever had an expansion project has probably experienced. At least everybody who's built a brewery has. It's like a joke in the industry. But we have about 200 investors now, and I still have the majority, but we have a lot of very small investors. It's something that we're looking at right now on a lot of different levels. It's funny, I'm right in the middle of, our shareholders don't sell their stock. But earlier this year I had a couple people who wanted to sell a little bit of their holdings because there's one person was having a home improvement and the other one got divorced and needed to buy a house. But I decided that I would make a market in our stock. So I told everybody twice a year, I'm going to put out a call. If anybody has shares they want to sell, you can, and then I'll conduct a Dutch auction, sort of a la Google style, which isn't truly a Dutch auction, but that's what everybody's calling it these days, and make a market. So I've got that actually going on until Saturday is the when we're closing the bids. So. Yeah, we have a lot of, I love working with artists and things, and from the art car parade, which started when I bought a 1957 Bentley and tie-dyed it, which that's been a lot of fun. You cannot pick your nose while you're driving that car because everybody is staring at you. You really shouldn't do that anyway. It's just gross. But now we have a series of art cars. I no longer personally paint them like I did the Bentley. That was an experience. But we have a couple artists that we do a lot of work with. Actually, 3 that we do a lot of things with. One is Carlos Hernandez, who I have a giant, one of his Day of the Dead, John Lennon canvas in my, actually it's like a burlap almost, in my office. But he also designed a label for us, Santo, and which I describe. If you're wondering, I call it a dark Kolsch, but it's what I wish dark Mexican lagers actually tasted like, but they don't. And that's been a lot of fun. And then we have a graffiti artist, Gonzo247, who he's the one who's painted the St. Arnold and the Santo on our silos. He's painted our elevator lobby on the 2nd floor. He's painted some of our art cars. I was in Miami last week, and I was in this section of Miami that has all this, it's called the Wynwood, I think, and or Windale maybe. Anyway, all these buildings are covered in graffiti. They just have artists come in and do all. It's really cool. And I texted him and said, hey, I'm in this really cool area. They got all these buildings covered in graffiti. He said, yeah, I've got a wall there. And it was like 2 blocks away from where I was. So I drove over and checked it out. That was cool. And then Robin Sanders, who's another one, she's painted a bunch of some of our art cars also. So, and then when you come into the beer hall, you'll see that we have the sort of the 6 stages of beer going up. 5 of them are now up. The malt, the hops, brewing, the cellar, the fermentation, the packaging, and then the last one will be the enjoying. So I really loved being involved in the arts. I think arts community is very important for having a vibrant community. So we do our part to help support it.
Well, Brock, thank you for sharing your early experience, but towards finding your passion and entrepreneurial spirit, since we have students here, might speak to finding an entrepreneurial spirit within the realm of a corporation or a large firm. You must get asked that. Is it possible? What's your thought?
Actually, I don't get asked that, but it's an interesting question. I think I've always been conflicted about the concept of teaching entrepreneurship, because I'm not sure that it can be taught. Because to me, to be a successful entrepreneur, you have to have very sound basic skills. So you need to have your building blocks. And the broader those building blocks are, the better off you are. I mean, learning accounting is critical. Business law is probably one of the better courses I ever took when I was an undergrad, even though I had no interest in going into law. Doing, financial modeling, corporate finance, all those things. But psychology, English is critical. Being able to communicate. I don't care what you do, being able to communicate successfully is so important. For me, I majored in mechanical engineering, although I dropped out of it my senior year because I hated my summer job, which was supposed to be as good as it gets. I was like, if this is as good as it gets, I'm out of here. But I use so much of my engineering background in running the brewery. I mean, thermodynamics and fluid dynamics and all these things happen to enter what I do. So I think the critical thing is having a sound foundation. And then whether to me, being an entrepreneur is then being very well planned and focused and having an idea of what you want to do. And to me, successful ones are risk averse, which is another thing that I find that people say, oh man, you really, entrepreneurs, I love the risk that you take on. Successful ones, there's probably a few that are lucky, and they give the rest of us a bad name. But the good ones have a really good plan in place and follow that plan and have everything figured out. They figured out where the struggles are going to be, so they can focus on them and figure out, is that going to be a trap or an obstruction? And then they figure out how to work around it, because if you don't do that planning and you run into that trap or that obstruction, you fall into it and then you're dead. But within a big organization, I think that creative thinking, we do that. We foster personal growth of our people. And to me, for it to be successful, first you have to have the right people in it, but then in the organization. But then I think it has to come from the top. That's the only place that entrepreneurship within the organization is going to the only way it will work, no matter what the people in the organization want to do. And from my standpoint, the way that works is I look at each person and I say, what are you good at? That's the direction I'm going to push you. I'm not going to say, I have this need and I have this person and this is a round hole and you're a square peg and I'm going to hammer the shit out of you until you go through that damn thing. I don't think that works very well. So I think if you have the culture of giving people latitude in what they want to do. I mean, the other thing that we do that I think, kind of to your point, helps foster creativity is, like, if somebody comes in and says, you know, I always ask people, what do you want to do in 5 years? And I'm listening to a lot of things that they probably don't think I'm listening for. But one of the things, if they say, well, I want to do this, and then in 2 years I want to be promoted to this position, promoted to this position, that's not how we work. You grow at St. Arnold by, you help grow the company. And if you want to grow personally, you take on more responsibility. I don't go around and tell people, okay, you've got more responsibility now. People assume it, and then I will go in after the fact sometimes and institutionalize it because that's important. But like, our guy who's now heads up Houston sales, he was the person who everybody else on the sales team was already turning to. He had taken the leadership role. So I just came in and anointed him after the fact, which is a much, in my mind, much better way of doing it than coming in, having a group of people, and then I just say, I take the respect wand, and today everybody looks up to you, which is great if everybody already does. But if they don't, everybody else here is now going, what did, okay, I won't say that. It just doesn't, you can't, force people to have respect. So I think for it to work, it's got to come from the top down, but it can.
I have a question. You talked about some of the newer breweries and on the top 100 list, you had no label and those sorts of things. And I know you said that you've been trying to work on making it a more friendly environment from a regulatory standpoint. What other things are you doing for young craft brewers to continue growing that space?
So when I started St. Arnold's, there was actually other craft breweries in Houston. They were all brew pubs, and we would have today. But there are, let me count at the brew pubs. Oh, 0. Actually, that's not true. I think Moon Tower is a brew pub now. But we would get together every month and have a meeting, and I'd have a topic, and we'd all talk about it and stuff. Well, after maybe 5 years, if we wanted to have a monthly brewers meeting, Houston Brewers meeting, it was me getting together with myself and having a beer, and that was the meeting. About 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, maybe almost 3 years ago, I started having these meetings again, and we hold them at different breweries around town. In fact, it was at No Label on Monday this week. And by the way, I have a lot more respect for everybody who lives in Katy and drives into Houston every day. Man, that's a long way out there. We go around and we get together. We'll talk about a topic, but really it's more about the camaraderie and all of us, seeing each other. And then you chat, you have sort of sidebar discussions about things, and it gives the new people an ability to ask questions of people like us who've been around longer and might have advice, might have, be able to tell them, a better way to do what they're doing, or where, a good resource to use for whatever it is. So to me, that's very important. I mean, the craft brewing industry is 99.5% asshole free. There's the 0.5%, but you can avoid them. And I really want to keep encouraging that. If there's any sort of dark cloud out there for us, I am starting to see people getting into the craft brewing world because they think they can make money at it. That is not a good thing, because that brings a whole different culture in. That's not what we're about. I'm really trying to make, and it's one of the things I want to do is these new guys open. I want to, if there's anything I do in the next 20 years, I want to pass along the culture of camaraderie. We're competitors, but it can be a friendly competition. It would be great if politicians would run and just talk about their own issues and what they believe in, instead of how that person slept with a dead goat last night. that's what I really want to see. And so hopefully even some of these people who are getting it with the wrong intentions that I don't personally respect, hopefully we can bring them into the fold to understand what the culture is and convert them to what craft beer ought to be. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Great job.